All right. Welcome. December 17th.
Woo!
Weekly roundup. Scott, Ben.
We're ready to go.
We're ready to go. Is this the last one before Christmas?
No, we're gonna do one more next week, probably Thursday.
Okay.
We're definitely not doing it Christmas Eve at 4:15. I'm
Christmas Eve.
certain we would be the only ones here.
Yeah, well, I think you'd be the only one here, actually. Commitments. Although, who knows by then if any of us will be even doing anything for Christmas. I was just
True enough.
watching the Ford announcement there, cutting all capacities and discouraging people from getting together, and kind of Groundhog Day all over again.
Yeah, I did not watch that yet. I think I've been trying to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what we thought was coming: cut capacity, restaurants, gyms, like, the usual suspects. I don't know how those guys are gonna. They were just starting to kind of lick their wounds and get back to it, and now that they have their knees cut out again.
Yeah,
Feel bad for them, really do.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see now. So we'll do one more next week. Markets are open in Canada and the US till Thursday, and then a short day on Friday for Canada. They close at 1 o'clock, but the US is closed all day Friday.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, I know the trading hasn't been too fast and furious, but so the markets have been a bit slower as far as volume's concerned. But what did the week that just passed look like?
Well, it was a big news week, I suppose, from a central bank perspective. We had kind of all of the world central banks meeting this week. So a lot of news flow out of there. People tend to watch the central bank of the US as well, for the most part. Powell spoke this week. He seemed to indicate, or at least he said anyways, that they would raise rates 3 times next year. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I tend to think that that's not possible, but that's what he said. He also said they're speeding up the taper and that they will no longer be in the markets after March or April, something like that. Again, we'll see. Part of why they've been able to do this, if you look at kind of the undercurrents, is the commercial banks have been lending. So strange that this is happening at the same time, where central bank is pulling back and commercial banks seem to magically be lending now. So that's how the markets and the economy, I guess, have digested the central bank pulling away. But we had a pretty big rally into the day on Wednesday after the news, kind of choppiness yesterday, down open, followed by kind of a rally into the day. Nasdaq closed pretty flat, but it was down a couple percent at one point today. So quite a bit of volatility into this week, but a lot of it I think was around U.S. central bank and what their views are and plans. So I'm going to go through and one of the charts just show kind of global rates and where they are and what's happening. But that was probably the biggest news flow this week.
Gotcha. I know you've been busy in portfolios though. What's that been looking like?
Yeah, so as we get down to year end, as you know, always looking for trying to take some tax losses. I've taken gains across the majority of portfolios. So spending lots of time seeing what I'm going to sell. There's a bunch of names still in portfolios that I will be liquidating over the next little while. Last day for tax loss selling is the 29th of December. So we got a bit of time, but spending lots of time looking at what to switch into, and lots of names have been beaten up. Haven't made too many material changes yet, but looking really actively at what I'm going to switch into. I think we talked about SPACs earlier this year. We do own some, so those haven't traded very well. So there's definitely going to be some switches there that'll happen. I saw a lot of commentary today, people kind of making fun of the S&P versus SPACs over the last few months. I think SPACs probably have a good next quarter or two ahead. So looking for some opportunities there. there's stocks here that are trading down 70-80%. That are good companies. So I'm looking at a lot of different names, including some of the ETFs, like we've talked about MSOS, which is cannabis. We've talked a little bit about Robinhood and some of these other names that have been hit really hard. China continues to be something that I haven't pulled the trigger on yet, but plan to. So KWeb was down about 7% this week, so it didn't go yet, but continue to watch that very closely. And I'd expect that to be in the portfolio here pretty soon.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what do you think? Time for everybody's favorite segment, Ben's charts.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Right.
I think it's a good idea.
I don't know. We've both been swamped all day, so we didn't have a chance. I don't even know what's coming. Every chart's going to be a surprise for me too.
Exactly. Let me know. Let me know when you're ready to go. Good to go. All right. Can you see it?
There it is. Yep.
Yep.
See it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this was really, as we look at kind of central bank rates around the world, why I wanted to put this up is it gives you kind of a snapshot for what's happening right now. And it's a bit of a Christmas tree here with the cuts versus the rate hikes. The rate hikes would be the red ones. And so we had the Bank of England raise rates this week, which was a shock to the market. They anticipated maybe a small move and they went 25 basis points. I know these numbers are kind of ridiculous when you look at how low they are. But if you look at those top 4 countries, you're still in negative rates on the short end. What I find the most interesting is you look down, and part of my comments over the last, we'll call it year and a half or 2 years, can't even remember how long we've been in this kind of COVID crisis. But the last time Canada moved was March of 20. The last time the US moved is March of 20. So now we sit here kind of going into 2022, almost 2 years into this thing. And now these central banks are saying, well, now things are fine and we're going to raise rates. Like, it didn't take 2 years for the economy to recover, but they've been sitting on their hands now waiting 2 years. And I think what's going to happen is they've waited way too long, and now you're going to find they're going to try to raise rates and the market's not going to like it. However, here we are, you're starting to see rates increase, and why this is pertinent is that you're going to start to see foreign exchange levels start to adjust based on what's happening with central bank policy. So this is just a kind of a global look at central bank rates.
Great. So how much did the fact that it looks like a Christmas tree factor into your picking of this chart?
A lot.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
That's my participation in Christmas for my kids.
I like that. I like it.
So I want to thank, I had clients send along some research this week, and this was one of the charts that they pointed out. I thought it was an awesome way to look at, I've talked a little bit about the fourth turning on and off on the show over the last year. And, as you get through these kind of different cycles, every period things kind of adjust, and it feels like we're in kind of that fourth turning narrative where, pandemic was one of those kind of turning events. So, these turnings are typically built around generations. And this is an interesting look at, how material the millennials are and the future outcome of the kind of politics, economy, all of these things. If you look at the statistics there, that big yellow box, that's a lot of people. And so, as we sit here with kind of the leaders of the world being, we'll call it probably majority baby boomers still, you're going to see kind of, I believe, at least in the next few years to maybe 5 years, you'll see a material change as the millennials start to take up leadership roles in politics and corporations, and kind of all the way through the spectrum. I think you'll see a pretty material change. So as we think about where things are going, I think it's really important to think about how this demographic is going to play a major part and how the world's shaped over the next many years. So I thought this was a great chart to have a look at that.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So, as we get so much pushback, I've had so many conversations around what's happening with crypto and blockchain, and kind of almost the first thing that people say when they don't like it is they come out and say, well, only people use that type of transaction for illegal activity. Well, as we kind of sit back, and I've been doing this long enough, 20 years in the chair, we saw 2008. Yeah, most of the people that made money from the subprime fiasco, nobody was impacted from it. Nobody went to jail. Nobody actually had any responsibility or liability around it. And so everyone points at crypto as the bad guys in the room. Yet, as we look at what continues to happen on Wall Street, and you wonder why people get frustrated, this was a report that came out today. I mean, this is today. JP Morgan has fined $200 million for allowing employees to use WhatsApp to give out insider information. So, they agree to pay a $200 million fine for illegal activity, and nobody's responsible for it. So, when you look at, as people talk about blockchain and crypto and why it has a voice and why it's even at the table right now, these are some of the major reasons why.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's a good one.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions or comments on any of this too, obviously the Q&A button's the best ones at the bottom of the screen here. So,
last one.
Last one.
All right. So yeah. So there's still lots to cover from the crypto world perspective, but I think what's one of the more interesting things to look at, I put out a piece today that went out in the Daily just talking about is Bitcoin money type thing, but this is a perspective at who owns it right now. And so it's still a pretty diverse. If you look at kind of that 50+%, that would fall into the other category. So that would be individuals, people that were kind of early investors in Bitcoin. So they would be the biggest holders at the time. There's about 10% still left to be mined. But, as we've talked about MicroStrategy on and off over the years, they're about a 12% holder of all the Bitcoin outstanding. And so as you think about, from a positioning perspective and why you may want to have certain exposures to things, this gives you an interesting breakdown of where it is and who owns it and why. So thought this was worth a look at to see who owns Bitcoin right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You always end it with a bang, eh? That's
the one. That's the one for you.
I know. I appreciate that. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Any questions? No questions yet. Or okay. All right. Brings us to the next week.
Yeah.
I guess typically slow week in trading.
I'd say volumes would be down next week. There's still, I've had lots of conversations with clients over the last couple of weeks talking about this tax loss selling, and so we continue to grind into that. And so I'll likely be busy next week trying to flatten out clients' tax accounts. And so again, if there is anything that you have that you want to discuss, let me know. But we'll be around. So. So it'll be fairly busy. Looking at so many companies that look cheap, and I think when you look at the index right now, you're thinking, how can there be cheap companies out there? So there's so many to look at, and so many they think are screaming buys here. It's going to be fairly busy with me kind of combing through that and seeing where we can put some money to work over the next few weeks.
Gotcha. Probably worth a note too that if anybody wants to contribute to TFSA or RSP, you don't have to wait right to the deadline. We get busy obviously at that time too, so you can do that anytime with us.
Yep. So the only thing we need to worry about for calendar year end is RESP. So if there is anything, anyone that wants to do that prior to year end, I know there's a couple of people we've spoken with around that. But if there are any that come up for RESPs prior to calendar year end, be good to do that now.
Fantastic point. Okay. No questions. Did you have, did somebody ask you a question via email? US
Uh,
dollar? No.
Yeah, so over this week, certainly
Yeah.
yesterday, I'd put out that point saying what's the US dollar backed by anyways, and had
Yeah.
a number of responses come back kind of questioning that and pointing to that as a point. It's something that I've been kind of thinking about and following for maybe 15 years. When I was at HSBC, they put out some kind of forward guidance around what they thought was going to happen with the US dollar as a store of value and a reserve currency. And it was interesting looking back now. They drew a lot of references to what was going to happen, where the US would over lever themselves, and a lot of the things that most reserve currencies do when they have that power. And eventually what it does is it puts them in a position where they can't maintain it at any point. So it would, so my point was the US dollar, while it continues to be 80+% of global trade, and it allows the US to maintain the strength that they have now. And so I think there is some hope they'll continue to be the leader and continue to have kind of the technology leadership in the world. But you can see quickly that China is really pulling attention and market value and continuing to grow very quickly. And so, my point is really that I think the US dollar is continuing to weaken, and that we go to, at some point in the future, some kind of basket, a reserve currency. And that basket is probably a combination based on GDP globally. But I think that only happens when you have central bank digital currency, so that you can settle easily and quickly. And so it appears that that's happening and coming. And I'm not saying it's tomorrow, but I am saying that the US dollar is losing the strength that it has and the leadership that it has. And so it's something to be conscious of. And I don't think crypto replaces that, but I think it enhances it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, I'm sure that'll create some comments after. All right. Any closing statements?
I don't think I have too many more things to point out, but I do think that China continues to grab a lot of my mind from what they're doing and where they're going. I don't know if we talked about this in one of the calls, but the #1 movie in the world right now by ticket sales is a Chinese film, only aired in China right now. And it is essentially China defeating the US in a war. So, as we sit here and we look at kind of the mainstream North American information that we follow and pay attention to, sometimes it's important to pay attention to what's happening in the rest of the world too, because I think we're going through a pretty material change right now, and we're trying to spend a lot of time thinking about what's ahead of us. And that's what I think takes a lot of our time and attention right now, to think about what's coming around the corner. And so that's something that I think about quite often right now.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. If there's no other questions, like Ben said, next week it'll be likely a Thursday edition of Weekly Roundup. Thanks to everybody for coming out, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks. Take care.